Hello and welcome to this edition of Addiction and Mental Health Mythbusters, the show where we try to use the facts to dispel some of the confusion and myths about addiction and mental health. The goal of the show is to help people come out from the shadows where they're hiding in shame and get the help they need. So our job is to present the facts, and your job is to join my YouTube channel, like this video, and most importantly, talk about it. The more we get people talking, the more we will be able to help people. So my name is Meg. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor associate. I work in the field of addiction, and I am also, thanks to the grace of God, haven't had to have a drink since 2008. So today's show is going to be, is there such a thing as an addictive personality? So my neighbor actually said to me, oh, I have such an addictive personality. And I thought to myself, is that real? It's kind of like somebody saying, I got poor metabolism. Is that real? It's a great excuse, but I don't know if it's real. So to help me unpack this is Dr. Deborah Brayboy. Dr. Brayboy is a PhD in counselor education and supervision. She is a professor at Liberty University. She also is a licensed professional counselor and runs a ginormous practice, like 19 counselors, I think she said, which is crazy. And on top of that, she has started doing her own podcast, Discovering with Dr. Deb. So when you get done with this podcast, you can go to Apple or to YouTube and check out Discovering with Dr. Deb. So thank you so much, Dr. Deb, for taking some time to join me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so one of the things that I had asked Dr. Deb about was she specializes in different counseling techniques like EMDR, and that is like eye movement desensitization, but she also has done a lot of work with Enneagram, and that is about personality. So could you tell us a little bit about what Enneagram is and how it works?
Yeah, so Enneagram, it's been around for eons, long time. It's a personality typing system, and it's a tool that I really love because it helps us to know ourselves better and love our people better. It's just a tool, one of many, that can help with personal growth, and I find it really helpful when I'm working with my clients.
Awesome.
So it's just, there's the Myers-Briggs, there is the DISC, there's all these different kind of tools out there. Right. One of the things I like about the Enneagram that kind of differentiates it from others is it doesn't just look at what we do, our behaviors, but it looks at why we do it.
Yes.
The core childhood message that we were either told or we just kind of interpreted the world through this lens. And then we have these core motivations, a core fear, a core longing, and that it's the why we do what we do, not just what we do. So that's really, in a nutshell, my little overview introduction of the Enneagram.
Enneagram, yes. So I've actually used the book, The Road Back to You, which is a book about these personality types. There's 9 of them. And in my situation, I have inpatient treatment. So I've got them for 30 days, which is like a blip. So sometimes we will use, like, say they're a 7 or something, and we'll talk about their beliefs and their core longings. And it kind of helps me cut through the whole process. And people will be like, oh my gosh, they think I'm psychic because when I read this stuff, it sounds just like them. And I'm like, I'm really not that good. It's just Enneagram is that exact. So we're going to be talking about personality, but you know, I love to have the facts. So I'm going to pull up I'm going to share my screen. So can somebody have an addictive personality? So let's talk about the facts a little bit. So in a previous podcast, we talked about the genetics. So people are predisposed to addiction by genetics, and it's about 40 to 60% predisposes somebody. So if your grandpa's got it, you know, you might want to be careful because it's kind of like cancer. Some people with a history of breast cancer in their family are more likely to get it. So it's not a guarantee. But it was interesting. They have actually identified the genes associated with addiction. And these mean nothing to most people, but I guess if you study the genome, they would mean a lot to you. So we have actually gone even farther. But interestingly enough, they now have narrowed it down to the gene and the type of addiction, but also the personality trait. If you see here, this DRD2, it's also linked to certain personality types like harm avoidance, which is low, you have low harm avoidance, and novelty seeking, which is high. So, so genetics does play a role. And like I said before, addiction is an option until you've crossed that line into the disease of addiction. You may be predisposed to addiction, but once you've drank or drugged or gambled or had sex to the point where your brain actually makes those changes and you have crossed over into the disease of addiction, then it's not a choice. But here, what we're talking about is people who still have the choice. So here are some of the personality traits, and I wanted to define them because I want everybody to be on the same page. So neuroticism, a personality trait, tendency to be negative, experience negative emotions. So extroversion, likes extra stimulus, that would be my son. Openness to experience, no such thing as too scary, too freaky, that's also my son. Agreeableness, more compassionate, cooperative, sympathetic, and conscientiousness. So let's see. Oh, and high neuroticism, which they see as high neuroticism, high openness to experience, low agreeableness, low conscientiousness were associated with substance use disorders. So all these personality traits are associated, but some are low and some are high. But so here is Enneagram. So this actually, your EnneagramCoach.com is going to be posted on my YouTube page, and you can actually click on it and take the test to find out what your personal Enneagram style is. So I am a 2, which is the helper, the nurturer, the supporter. And Dr. Brayboy, you're a 9, right? You're the...
I am. I'm a 9.
The accommodator.
Accommodator or the mediator, right?
Yeah, or the I can't handle anything that has conflict in it.
Oh, that's so true.
It
Conflict, challenging situations, tension.
Yes. One of my dear friends is a 9, and literally her whole demeanor changes. If I start disagreeing with her, she just shuts right down. It's
yes.
like, she has left the building. We are not going to have this discussion. So, and this is the book, The Road Back to You, The Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery, that I'm referencing with these upcoming slides. It's a great book. I strongly recommend if you want to learn more about yourself through Enneagram, I never say it right, Enneagram, then this is a book you could pick up, and you can get it at Amazon. So let's talk about 7s. 7s. So this guy jumping off the cliff, I mean, that just gives me chills looking at that. Because
yes,
that's what my son would do.
Yes. Yes.
And since day one, like 2 years old, Mom, I want to be a parachuter commando guy or a movie star. I'm like, let's go with movie star.
Right.
A little safer.
Yeah. So 7s, so their childhood message that they've internalized is it's not okay to depend on others for anything. And so they are very self-reliant, but they really have this desire to kind of be taken care of, which is kind of, it's like I don't know that really makes sense, but when I unpack that with clients, they just will nod. But what we see is that they avoid boredom They feel like they're being trapped if they don't have access to adventure. Their mentality is if a little bit feels good, then a lot must feel really good. And they do everything to avoid feeling negative emotions or pain in any emotional, physical, in any way. And they have FOMO, like bad fear of missing out. So
yes. What's going on? What are we doing?
Yes, what's going on? They might be the last to respond to a party invitation. Hey, we're having a group of people. Do you want to come over? Because they want to see if something else better comes along. But if nothing does, then they will show up.
Then they'll come.
So that's kind of the optimist, the enthusiast. Like they're the life of the party. They are a lot of fun. They adventure seekers. Some of the descriptions, you've got high openness to experience, high impulsivity, avoid negative emotions at all costs, always up for the next adventure, low conscientiousness. They're really, so I have a client right now who, when I had her, she's in a risky job, something most of us consider a risky job. When I learned she was the 7, it was like, this all makes sense.
Yes.
Because the emotional pain that she was experiencing, if anybody else heard it that was not a 7, they would like go, you can live through that. But for a 7, it just goes from maybe a 2 or 3 or a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10 to a 10, like this emotional pain. And it's like, just can't bear it. Constantly saying things and actually pretty mentally healthy, but it's just this 7-ness that we're really working through. Because it's like around the age of 30, friends are getting married, still wanting to live life and do things and feeling kind of hobbled, like restricted.
Yeah.
And super hard for a 7. But like I said, their kind of concept is if a little bit feels good, then a lot must feel really, really good.
Yes.
So they're kind of prime for addictions, I would think.
They really are. I mean, like I hear repeatedly, I don't want to feel anything. I don't want to feel that pain.
Yes.
And in early sobriety, all those feelings come up. And then they're on the roller coaster because their brain chemistry is a hot mess. So it's changing. But for the 7s, you can see because they really, when they tank, they freak. They're just like, I can't handle this. And I'm like, this is the easy part of the show. Okay. There's no cops going to arrest you here. There's no angry family. It's all safe and kumbaya. But these guys are like, no, I'm feeling pain. And these guys, if I make them cry, then I am just the worst.
Right. And they're just, gluttony is kind of their, is kind of their core weakness, because they feel this emptiness inside and they have this insatiable desire to kind of fill themselves up with experiences or stimulation in hopes to kind of numb that. Like they just have that void. And so they do anything to avoid feeling that.
Well, and
be trapped or emptiness.
What's interesting, and it says this in the book too, that they use this to avoid the pain, but after a while it doesn't work. And that's exactly what addiction is that, you get this big rush, big dopamine rush when you start off and you're like, wow, this is it. I found it. And then your brain changes and it isn't as receptive to dopamine. Those receptors literally change. And then all of a sudden it takes more and more and more. But in the meantime, you're not behaving the way you should be. You're behaving badly. You're getting into trouble. And so this pain is just layering on. People are angry at you. You've hurt people, and so what happens is the drug stops working or the drink stops working, but you can't do anything else because you can't deal with this pain.
Right.
Which is why I always say, you cannot recover alone. There's
Right.
lots of different ways to get recovery, but not alone.
Right.
Because it's too much. You have to have somebody hold your hand and say, you can and will live through this. Because it's
right. Yeah. Yeah. But sevens have this longing to be taken care of because that's what fills that empty void that they have. And
Yes.
for them to know it's okay. And that's why, like you're saying, they can't do it alone.
No. I even describe, like, when we explain the steps to people of AA, the 12 steps, step 5 is where you share all your stuff, right? And it's almost like cleaning out all that baggage and allowing for the Holy Spirit to come in. And that's where the good stuff is. And so a lot of times people, after they do their 5th step, will feel tremendous relief. They'll be like, oh, I feel like a weight's been lifted off of me.
And that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but for 7s to do that 5th step, wow, that's asking a lot.
It is. It's asking a lot of the 7 because it's just like, shining a flashlight on that super dark spot that they hope never sees light.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I've seen a lot of 7s, they're like, I want to go from, I'm going to get there and I'm going to finish this and I'm going to be okay. I'm going to work these steps and then I'm going to move on to the next thing. And so when they leave, they might work the steps, but they get into a job, they get busy, they get their life back, and then they're right back into old behaviors of do, fun, and then all those negative emotions build up. So for a 7, working with somebody and continuing the process of sobriety is so important.
Right. And my clients that are 7s that struggle with addictions, one thing we emphasize the most, honestly, is sponsor. Got to have a sponsor, got to stay in contact with the sponsor, and then attending their meetings. It's just something they can't stop doing.
No. Well, anybody in recovery, I would say, needs to have that. But
7s, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Like, it's interesting though, because in the book, The Road Back to You, it says the thing that 7s want the most is to feel cared for by God.
Right.
To feel that love. And that when you work the steps, that's what you have as a spiritual experience. And all of a sudden you realize that God's had you all along. And that I think when you see somebody get that, it's one of the greatest joys in my job is when somebody finally realizes that, I don't have to do this by myself. That was not a good message for me. I'm not alone. I don't have to unpack this baby all by myself.
Right. Well, we were created for connection, with God and with other people. Yeah. So it's no wonder that we're not going to find healing alone. We've got to find it with other people. Even our 5s who are much more introverted types, like they need other people. Like we all need other people.
Yes.
Especially on the road. For recovery, we need it for support, but we also need it for accountability.
Absolutely. And I think that's why COVID has been so devastating to so many, especially in addiction. We had to do Zoom, which, it worked, but it's not the same. It is not the same as having somebody who can see you.
Yes.
So let's talk about 8s.
8s. Okay.
So don't you love that? That's actually, look at how tiny this dude must have been. It must have been a French dude. They're tiny people, but.
Yeah, it must have been Napoleon.
Yes.
So 8s have their childhood messages that it's not okay to trust anybody and it's not okay to be vulnerable with anyone. I know 8s really well. My husband's an 8, so I've learned about 8. Their core longing is you will not be betrayed. Like they have this strong desire not to be betrayed.
Right.
And that's why they have this armor on.
Yes.
Their core fear for an 8 is being weak or powerless, harmed,
Yes.
controlled, vulnerable. So it's not necessarily that they want to control others, but they will take control of situations because they don't want somebody else controlling them.
Right.
So they come across a lot of the times as controlling, and they are, but most 8s will tell you they will step into leadership and they will, take over a situation if it needs to, because they would rather them do it than somebody else do it and them be vulnerable or be
under their thumb. Yes.
Right. They don't want to be controlled. So you've got here their leaders or steamrollers. So if they're healthy, I often call them a snowplow. If they're unhealthy, I often call them a steamroller. So the distinction there is that a snowplow will plow the way for others to come behind them.
Right.
And be able to navigate that. A steamroller, we know what they do. They just roll over you.
Yes.
They have a strong need for justice. They are protectors. They have a fear of being betrayed, fear of being vulnerable. The world is a hostile place, high neuroticism. So those are all typical descriptors for an 8. So they like I said, I like to use the description of a snowplow if they're healthy, but they're very, very big-hearted. They very much care about other people.
Yes.
But they're going to protect themselves. I love that guy.
The little armor guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I find with 8s is, so resentments in sobriety, they say in the big book, resentment's the #1 offender.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are all worried about justice, and I hear a lot, that's not fair. That's not fair. And I'll be like, is the world fair? Have we gotten what's fair? No. So fair is a great concept for children, but fair doesn't really exist. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And of course, they're like, I want to be both. But the reality is, if you want to find some peace, this whole idea of fair and black and white thinking has to soften. And that is hard for them. That is really, really hard because a lot of them feel justified, and they are justified. I mean, I'm not even going to take that from them. They are justified. A lot of times they're justified, especially when it's like a social, you're from poverty, your family was, abusive, your school system was horrible, the cops targeted you, of course you're going to have lots of anger and want revenge. But the reality is that just anger and hurt just makes more anger and hurt.
Right. And 8s typically will, like you said, they will feel justified in it. And it's like, it's important to validate that for them.
Yes.
But then decide how we're going to move past that. How do we get to a healthy place?
Right, exactly. And so, this is where sometimes for me, God is important, because what I'll say is, you know what? I don't know why. That's just too big of a concept for me. I don't know why this happened. The only person who knows why is God, and he's out of time. So we aren't able to find that out. What a healthier question is, what do you want me to do with this? What can I do with this?
Right.
And that puts them back into control. I'm like, when you let your anger and resentment at somebody control you, you've given your power away because they have control. In fact, I have a classic example. I bet you my grandma was an 8. I came home and she's like 95. And I had gone to this Baptist church and she was like, those dirty Baptists. I'm like, what? Dirty Baptists. And I was like, Grandma, who wound you up? What is going on? And she's like, when I was 16, the Baptists came into our school and told us we were sinners for dancing. I'm like, Grandma, you're 95. She's been holding on to that all those years. I'm like, all those people are dead, Grandma.
Yeah.
And I promise you, they didn't even know you, let alone remember you. And yet she let that take root.
Yeah.
And just have power over her. So a lot of times for AIDS, I'll talk about, you can take your power back by letting go of that, by choosing to not let them have power over you anymore.
Right. And that's really great language to use with an 8, because when they realize then that they've given somebody else the power, because they don't like that. That's the whole thing about 8. They don't want somebody else controlling them. But when you can help them to see that what they're doing is exactly what they don't want to do, giving their power away, then that can be a game changer.
Yeah, they can be like, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe there's hope.
And I always tell them, there's not a maybe. You can do this. It's just, let's look at the options. What are your options like that you can do? You know, no doubt you can do something about this. It's just how do we want to move forward from here? We don't want to be here anymore. This isn't healthy or productive.
Right.
So how do we make it look different? And sometimes that's the first step with an 8. It might not be what are the steps to get there, but what do we want it to look like? And then what do we need to do to get there with an 8?
I like that. Yeah, kind of talking about the end game. So this is what you could be. This is where you are. Okay, so we don't want to go backwards, so let's go forwards. Perfect. Let's be a snowplow, not a steamroller.
That's right.
When we step on the toes of our fellows, they retaliate. So we know that being a steamroller does not make for good neighbors. So now, do you not love this picture?
I love
So
that.
for those who are listening, it's a little boy who is giving this girl his sippy cup, and he's got this look on my face like, I better get something good for this. You better appreciate me. And being a 2, I can tell you that is my number one problem, is that I love to help, but you had better praise me and tell me how awesome I am.
Yeah. So the childhood message for a 2 is that it's not okay to have needs of your own. So somehow they have internalized that it's not okay to have needs of their own, but all they really want, what their longing is, to be wanted and loved for just who they are, not what they do.
Yes.
But 2s have this superpower. We all kind of have a superpower, all of the 9 types, but the 2's superpower, they can walk into a room and read it and know what everybody needs.
Yes.
And they insert themselves then. And even when they're not asked, meet those needs, because then that's where they feel loved and valued. It's they don't feel loved and valued just because I'm Meg and I'm here. It's what I can do for you. I can do this for you, and then therefore you will then validate me, love me, value me, and that's where our purpose comes from, instead of just who you are. So so 2s have these expectations, like
yes, we
they can
do.
be called the helper or the supportive advisor or things like that, but their fear is being rejected and unwanted, to be thought of worthless or needy, dispensable, unworthy of love. And so they will deny their own needs and emotions. And that's this picture is perfect for that, because he's like going, he looks a little warm himself, a lot, but I'm going to sacrifice.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to sacrifice for you. But with this expectation. So you've got here on the slide, expectations lead to resentments, because often they're unfulfilled. Or
yes, they are.
They feel criticism deeply, deeply. Needy, they feel needy, and they let the world tell them their value. Like, their value is not in who they are, but what they do. That's how a 2 interprets it. And then they fear sharing their own needs. Like I said, that message that they've internalized from childhood is, it's not okay to have their own wants and needs.
Right. Yeah. And so I honestly let the world tell me who I was and whether I was okay for a long, long time. And let me tell you, it's exhausting because trying to please the world doesn't work well, because not everybody likes you. Not everybody values what you have. We love to give advice. Oh, we know exactly what you need, and we're going to tell you how to do it. And
yes, that's your superpower.
I know, but the problem is advice given when not asked for is criticism.
Yeah.
And my kids will tell you that in the guise of advice, I can be highly critical, and then that makes me feel bad and it makes them angry. So
and it comes across also as critical and judgmental.
Very much so. And
yeah. But twos, they just overgive, an abundance. And they don't realize, like you said, like your kids will tell you, and but twos, they don't perceive it as that. Like, it's just like, I'm just trying to help. They say that all the time. I'm just trying to help. And it's like, you weren't asked to help. And that's where I said they insert themselves, like it's unsolicited often, but that's where they feel valued. But that expectation is, this person needs this, I'm going to give them this. But if they don't, like, oh, thank you so much. Like,
yes,
kind of have this expectation, like, I'm meeting this need and that need for these people. And then therefore I have value. And
I'm better than you.
And yes.
I mean, theirs is definitely pride. And I think twos a lot of times are our codependents as well, because if you would just do what I say, I would be happy.
Yes.
And that's what a codependent is. They're obsessed with everybody else. They're obsessed with the problem. My mom is a two, and she says she's basically a happy person, but she's very codependent. But I found that in early sobriety, I could not do anything. I couldn't say yes to anything without running it by my sponsor, because if I had any notion of getting some kind of praise or thank you, I couldn't do it. And boy, I had lots of free time because I ended up saying no all the time.
Right.
And it really made me realize how ingrained in this was for me, was to do this, but always, thinking I'm so caring and giving and loving. And the reality is there is a price for everything I was giving out. It had a price. And if you didn't pay that price, then by God, I was upset.
Right.
You
were hurt.
Very much so. For me, this whole helping has to be constantly tampered with what's God's will. Because otherwise I go into unhealthy two mode. So whether it is codependence, which is addiction, or it is drugs, alcohol, shopping, shopping's a big one. Just anything that changes the way we feel can become an addiction. And for twos, they have to be careful about what they're doing, because those resentments are what we struggle with, because it means I'm not lovable. I mean, I got that message clear. When I was a little kid, my grandpa said, Margaret Ann, if you don't give 110% all the time, you're nothing.
That's where that message came from. Yeah.
That's a faulty message if I ever heard one, because who can give 110% all the time?
Right.
But if I didn't, I felt, and I still can be that way. If I'm not going and doing and helping people, I feel like I'm being, I'm slacking off. I'm being lazy. But the reality is that I am lovable for who I am, not for what I do, because I'm a child of God, not because I'm good at what I do, which I am pretty good at what I do.
You are.
Progress, not perfection, right?
Right. But this profession lends itself to twos. And sometimes even, working with our clients, we pour into our clients, and I have to remind my supervisees and new counselors, like, If you're working harder than the client, there's a problem.
Yes.
Twos
Yes.
often will do that. They will overwork themselves with their client.
Yes.
You're working harder than your client is. There's a problem. And then, you know, you have a client that's like, I think I'm not going to come back, and they get, you know, kind of hurt. And that's where I use the Enneagram in supervision with my supervisees. Right. I know what all of my supervisees Enneagram is, because I have one who's a 7, and it's like, you've got to let your clients go to those hard places, but they avoid it. So it works that way as well.
I never thought about that, but absolutely, they wouldn't want to go. Yeah, where me, on the other hand, I want you to go to that hard place, and I'm going to help you.
Yes, and you're going to help because you're a 2.
Because I'm all that in a bag of chips. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for me, though, I have learned, because with this disease, you walk over a lot of bodies.
Yeah.
I am not God. I am there to walk alongside people, but when they decide to leave and go back out, I have to let them have their journey. And it's heartbreaking at times, but it has helped me from becoming a victim of my 2-ness. Because if I'm working harder than them, I'm not doing them any favors whatsoever, because the work is hard. That's all there is to it. It's hard work. Right. So let's see, what did we come up with? So, myth busted or supported? Is there such a thing as an addictive personality? Yes, there absolutely is. And if you are a 7, a 8, or a 2, just use caution. Just knowledge is power. You know, if you know who you are, like my kid, you know, I have to let him be his 7-ness, but I can also help him realize that he's loved by God, and that he doesn't have to do it alone. I mean, the power of the Enneagram is that it really gives people insight into why they do what they do. And so with that, I thank you so much, Dr. Deb, for coming and helping me unpack this. And remember, everybody, Discovering with Dr. Deb at Apple and also at YouTube. She has lots more on the Enneagram and other fascinating, because this is a woman who's got loads and loads of experience. Yes, I'm biased. She was my professor, and I thought she was the best one there. So, but thank you so much. Yes. And bye. Oh, guys, next one is going to be treatment. I know I promised to do it earlier, but Brian is going to come back, and we are going to unpack the different types of treatment for addiction, and we are going to include harm reduction in it. So stay tuned for that.